Yeah, it's 10 o'clock on a day that I do this, as opposed to being 10 o'clock on a day that I don't do this. This being, um, well, at the moment, it's being making another model because that's it. I don't have any Dungeons and Dragons related stuff to do, so I'm not doing any D&D related stuff because I don't have any of that stuff to do. So I'm still working on a model. In this case, I'm working on the XFY-1 vertical takeoff Pogo because that's just how it worked. Um, a really kind of bizarre plane that was made during, I think, the 1950s, maybe, when a lot of bizarre stuff was being attempted. This particular one is supposed to, well, there's a picture on the box, but the box is over there, and I don't feel like reaching it right now. So I'll just tell you what I'm doing. I got the wings cemented together on Monday, and now there's all sorts of seams that need to be sanded off. A lot of them, actually. It's quite, quite messy. But it's all going to be painted metallic aluminum, and so the seams will show if I don't very carefully sand them away. So I'll probably be spending a lot of today sanding. So I'm going to take all of these clothespins and clips and stuff off of the wings, and then go, this is really a mess. This is going to take a while. I hope I have enough sandpaper. I'll have to look around and make sure I've got enough because it's going to take a lot of work. But the other thing I'm going to do is there's the fuselage, which is also in two parts that needs to be cemented together. And then after that, cement sets, that would be on Friday because I'm going to cement it together today. So on Friday, I'll be unclipping and rubber banding that, and then there'll be more complaining and groaning about how badly the seams show and how much work it needs to be done to make it be presentable. So that'll be that. I don't really mind the sanding that much, but it just, I don't know if it makes for very good streaming. I guess it's relaxing, I guess, as long as I come up with something to ramble on about while I'm doing it. Well, why not just take all this stuff off here? And you can see already that these parts, actually, they just didn't even line up very well. So there's going to be a lot of, it's like, after the wings were put together, it's, well, it is what it is. There's lots of plastic there. So as I do the sanding and all of that sort of stuff, I'll also be checking to see if I need to do any filling in of the seams, with putty. It helps if I can actually get those off. Well, at least it does. It looks, I don't see any spots where it like fell apart. So that's good. These things, they are out of the way. Sort of try to keep my work surface under control. I'll take the tape off in a minute. Put these up out of the way. I've got this block with these wheels right here next to this, so that I remember to put the wheels into the wing before I cement it. It's an important thing to do. Otherwise it would be not just an oops, but kind of like a disaster. Don't particularly need a disaster. These they go in and out. I don't know why, but they do. using these clips on the rest of it. Yeah, see, this one didn't line up the same way the other one didn't line up. But there's a lot of plastic. So as I sand it down, this whole thing will get smaller, but it won't have this seam on it. These are just begging to be broken. They just are. I'll have to remember to be careful. But since I'm going to be, yeah, that's kind of messy too. At least it stuck together. That's good. As opposed to not sticking together and having a big gap. We'll see how this one went. Yeah, this one looks okay too. I don't see a need at this point for filler putty, except maybe right up here. I'll have to see how that sands out. Well, there'll be a lot of plastic dust being created when I get around to sanding these, but I think what I'm going to do though is set these. I need to set them in a box. I'm not prepared. Hold on. Get in here. Just throwing them on the floor. Why not? Okay. In here. They'll be relatively safe, I hope. So then I've got this thing. Not cemented together. It's just, I was test fitting it. Camera guy. Let's pay attention. I was test fitting it on Monday, and so the parts are kind of together, but they're not cemented. And the other thing I was doing is I put some cardboard in here to block the back of it, and I'm going to paint that black. Okay, so that you're not looking at the inside of the model. And I think that worked out okay. So this seems to go together poorly. Yeah. What I need to do though is, most of these seams are going to get all sanded down. After the cement is on. No, they don't line up. That's great. I'll have to make sure I work hard to line them up before when I put the clips on. So I'll be clipping the wings carefully and then rubber banding the rest of this. But this part here, I need to be able to do anything with this once the wheel is on and it is all cemented together. Okay? I just won't be able to because these wheels will be sticking out. So I'm going to just file it down to make sure it's even. as much as it can be. Rest of it around it, we'll wait until it's until the cement is set. All these little thin little bits of, I call it flashing. It's where the plastic oozed out between the two halves of the mold. You can see it significant here. It's pretty thin and kind of just breaks off, but I'm not bothering with it now because all the edges will have to be kind of pretty thoroughly sanded after the cement is set. Okay, so what I've learned from the test fitting here is that these things don't line up very well, and so I'm going to have to be, once the cement is on there and I start putting these alligator clips all around the perimeter of the what are vertical stabilizers, but they're huge, right? They're huge, and they're on the bottom as well as the top because it lands like that. So, yeah, it's just, you know, typical plastic model not being very good. They could see, I can tell that they spent a lot of time on the detail, all these little rivet lines and ailerons and control surfaces and everything. They spent a lot of time on the mold, creating the mold, the design of the mold, but not, and they didn't continue that care in the actual manufacturing process. They just didn't. And that's true of most of these models, especially the older ones, you know, where they it's not very well manufactured. All right. These need to come apart. And then all sorts of cement needs to be put on all the edges. And then I have to put them together without getting too much on my hands. It will. I'll get it on my fingers. I just know I will. But these guys need to go in here like this. Before I put the parts together. So I guess I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this cementing together stuff early on in the stream here before I start becoming. Hi, I'm on. Thanks for joining in. I'm about to cement together the fuselage. It's checking to see if there's any real rough edges that will get in the way of it coming together. I'm sure there are. I'm going to be putting a whole lot of cement on all of these edges and then putting the parts together, hopefully without getting very much on my hands. I really don't want to get it all over my hands. I'm going to dump them. It's easier to pick them up for the cardboard than it is from inside the thing there. How are you doing today? Yep, I test fitted all the parts. These verticals and these vertical up and down don't line up very well. There aren't really any alignment pins on them of any value. So what I discovered is I have to be really careful and take a lot of time to get them in line as I clip a whole lot of these alligator clips on these to hold them together. And then this part here, I'm going to use rubber bands to hold it together. I've got a couple that aren't broken yet. See how that works. Well, I can sit around and just talk about doing this and never get around to doing it, or I can just dive in and hope for the best, right? So here we go. I'm going to be putting a bunch of cement on these parts, and hopefully it will be okay and not real messy. I'm going to be, doing the cementing, and then I'm going to be doing a bunch of sanding because of the wings I put together on Monday. So I need to talk about something. Maybe we can carry on a conversation about your characters and their character development. Got almost spread the cement all over the outside of the fuselage. And really, sometimes just not careful. I think that comes from being ancient. And before I stick these together, I have to remember to put the wheels in. I was just kind of just forgetting about that for a moment there. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you had a chance to play. Did you all survive? When you all survived your battles? Okay. Get these in place. They're not going to stay. I'll just have to figure out how to do that. All right. Well, now it's a matter of getting these aligned. I guess I'll worry about that in a minute. Not quite. Ah, well, I guess that helped, didn't it? Having the unlimited potions. Sorry, I'm trying to get these clips on, but yeah, it sounds like it was kind of fun, but challenging maybe. It looks lined up, but it doesn't feel like it. Get this one and I'll come back to it. Oh, okay. So the potions, but the potion, well, yeah, I guess they work the same way as the spells, kind of. The potions take time, a turn to use. Take these off. It just isn't quite right. A little better. Just trying to minimize how much sanding down I'm going to have to do later. Dog found something to bark about. Yeah, it's too bad you can't hear the dog barking. It's really pretty impressive. We have two dogs, and one of them is thinks she's like a hyper super watchdog. Grab anything. this part to be pretty nicely aligned. It's not cooperating terribly well. Okay, well, the problem is, so what I'm feeling is a ridge here. Okay, this side is higher than this side as I run my thumbnail along it. And then when I do it on the bottom, the same side is higher than the other side. So the right side of the fuselage is actually a tiny, tiny fraction of a millimeter bigger than the other side. Usually if they're misaligned, you know, this side would be higher on this side and lower here, right? And I just adjust it. But it's higher on both the top and the bottom. Lovely. So there's going to be there's just a seam along the whole thing here. This one's kind of sticky. This one moves really freely. I mean, this one will move, but it's just tighter. Well, as far as I can tell, this is okay. I'm gonna put a clip right on the ends of the wings. If there's going to be a separation, that's where it's going to be. These closer to the pod. Got the clips. I'm going to clip them on. There. That looks excessive, doesn't it? Yeah. So the right side, even on the back here, yeah, the whole thing, the right side of the fuselage is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit bigger than the left side, meaning that it ends up being like raised up, and then it'll have to be sanded down all the way along in order to look right. It is what it is, and that's what it is. It is what it is. Got one more. What the heck? There, that's cemented together, and it looks pretty absurd at this point, but yeah, that's what it's going to be. Oh my. Huh. It's only 10:30. What am I going to do for the rest of a million years? How many are in your group altogether? If two want to become potion masters, how many others are left, and what are they going to do in terms of their characters? I've got an extra rubber band. Here. I'll put it back in place where it's supposed to be later. Okay, there are several things I can be doing. Oh, let me remember what's in here. I think the propellers are in here. Yeah. So these need to be, these end up going together like this, and there's a set of gears on the inside that are supposed to interact with these little ridges, these little nubs. They sort of do. I tested this out once, and it does work that when this one turns this way, this one turns this way. So they both turn on an axle. And then the nose cone gets attached up here. These parts all need to be painted black, and they're actually prepped. I could probably prime and paint these guys. Oh, that didn't work. There's a flaw. There's a flaw in the plastic. There's just a little, and it's the way it was molded. It isn't something that came later. It was molded with a little divot there. And I put some plastic filler on there, and I don't know, it didn't hold. So I'm going to try this other stuff to see if that holds. I mean, it minds if it holds good. If not, I'm no worse off. But this is green. Definitely see it's there. On Friday, I'll see how that is. What I could do is let's see if it sets up by the end of the stream. I'll try to sand that down. I might, if I primed and painted these, them, I could assemble the propeller assembly, because the way it's designed is it's a separate construction. Okay. There's just a ridge here that may get in the way of assembling. But the whole propeller thing on the front is a separate construction, and at the end, it just gets attached. It just gets cemented on. So everything would be painted. The fuselage would be painted, and this would be painted. Just go together. So at some point, I can, do one more check of these to, for build quality. I sanded them down pretty well, though. I know I checked all the surfaces before. So after this green putty sets up, that's set, I can get on to priming and painting these. I probably should. I should mask the inside here. Not so much here, that doesn't matter, but here where the gears go, I don't want that to get painted. So I'm going to run a line of tape around the outside edge of this. I want to paint this rim. Why? Because the rim shows, that's not good. As I'm messing around with this, I am finding noticeable flaws in the preparation of the part. There's just some flashing here right on inside of the propeller right there. These will all need to be checked one more time before they actually go into the painting. Yeah, the ladder's done. You can see the ladder there is kind of flimsy looking, just like the real thing would have been. There, I showed them to you, so now you know they're there. Okay, what's going to happen here is I'm going to move this box up out of the way. I don't need the instructions at this point for what I'm doing. I'm going to keep the file out in case there's some areas that require a huge amount of work. I'm going to take these wings. I wonder if that'll fit in the box with all those clips in it, but I bet not. I don't need my paintbrushes. So I'm going to set this up out of the way. I'm just going to leave it there and cover it with a paper towel. I'm going to be making a lot of plastic dust. I don't particularly want to get it on that. These were the wings. If you don't look at them too closely, they look pretty good. If you look at them closely, you can see that they have really serious seam issues. So I'm going to be getting sandpaper. I'm going to be using fairly coarse sandpaper initially. I'm going to be using this 400 grit stuff because there are some parts like along here, you know, and along here where there's a lot of prep work that needs to be done. And then you got weird stuff like here. See if that was on purpose or not. Yeah, it is. There's a little ridge here on both sides, but there's a excess plastic right next to this one. That's going to be a challenge. Yeah, looks like parts of a plane, doesn't it? So I'm going to be using the 400 grit to do the initial shaping, and then I'm going to use 1,000 grit to polish, especially these pods where they're going to be. The pods end up here where the sanding is pretty aggressive. The leading and trailing edges of the wings, there's not much surface area there. So, I mean, I probably could even file. In fact, there's a lump here that I probably need to file off. But those don't need the polishing as much as these, which need a lot of work in order to make them look like they're a single piece and not just a couple of pieces of plastic stuck together. Well, that's what I'm muttering about. I'm going to be just doing a lot of sanding and then getting plastic dust all over the cardboard here. I could put a paper towel down. I've done that before, but then it's white on white and I don't have enough contrast to be able to see what I'm doing. Seeing what I'm doing is enough of a challenge as it is anyway. I know I'll be going through more than one of these strips. I just use these little strips because I can fold them around my balsa wood sanding block. So who gets to go first? This one, because it's right there. And I might as well start on the part that is the biggest issue. Fortunately, these pods on the ends of the wings, let me say fortunately, they didn't mold in a lot of rivet lines. And so if I have to sand off like a 64th of an inch of plastic, which is actually quite a lot, in order to get the seams to go away, I'm not destroying any detail, which is a good thing. Yeah, this is going to take a long time. There's a lot of plastic that needs to come off. So what can I do with a monologue? Let me talk about our Dungeons and Dragons show. We haven't done that in a while. I might as well, huh? So this stream is by Dyson Dungeons, and Dyson Dungeons is not about model building at all. It's about our Dungeons and Dragons show, which is an amazing show. It's been going on for quite a long time. You can catch all the old episodes on YouTube and listen to them as a podcast, and you should probably do that, and you get to catch up with our characters. But it's not just a game, it's not just us playing in our basement, which is kind of what we're doing, but it's done in a studio, and we get into our characters really well. The story arc is amazing. Our DM, she's a very talented voice actor, makes all the NPCs come alive. I mean, just does an amazing job with that. My character is a furbog fighter. I've got a model of my character up here that I can show to you when I get tired of sanding and need to take a break from it if I remember to do that. But our show is really, really good, and you need to watch it. And this, we produce our own dungeon tiles and minifigs for our show. On the 3D printers, we have PLA printers for the dungeon tiles and rosin printer for our minifigs. And then this stream started because they need to get painted, and they're all hand painted, mostly with my hands. This would go faster if I use the file, but I really don't want to do that. That leaves way too many scratches. It's sort of coming along. The seam doesn't show. I'm just trying to get the shape right. So I'll show you some of the dungeon tiles maybe later, if this, depending on how this comes along here. So instead of having a nice smooth side, where the sides, where they came together, it kind of bulges out a little bit. And it doesn't look right. So yeah, what am I doing? I'm taking like 15 minutes and I'm sanding. I'm getting a half an inch of this done. That's pretty impressive. It's going to be like that. Because these side pods just require a huge amount of work to make them look decent. And that's starting to look decent. I'm going to do the back here. This is kind of delicate, so I'm going to do that while I'm still pretty coherent. Not sand off the paint on the wheel there. Oh, good. I dropped it. I'll be back in a minute. I have a second. I have to pick it up. Bend and stretch. Oh, that was. Did that in grade school. So yeah, in well, I was talking about D&D shows, so I'm gonna keep talking about that before I start talking about this, our music exercise classes in elementary school, which were kind of weird. For some reason, the nuns thought that singing was a good thing. So the can't feel. Yeah, there it is. I can feel it. Okay, that's why I still see it. There's a significant amount of plastic that needs to come off of this here. There we go. It's starting to disappear. What's important, this kind of sanding down is really important, and I actually should even look at it through my head magnifiers, is because this is going to be painted silver, well, aluminum really, and any kind of glossy paint. Just if there's the slightest imperfection, it just blares. I mean, it just really jumps out. And so if one can see the seam without any paint on it, it's going to be pretty significant when it's painted. The other thing I've learned is that, it can look okay. And then after it's primed, even the primer, which is a flat, just a flat white primer, that can reveal flaws as well. I would have liked to have done this before the wheel went on, but I couldn't. It's just not. I don't know if there's like a gap in the plastic or if it's just the color. Usually these seams, like, they just visually disappear if I get them right. So our D&D show, yes, watch it. We have our DM, Alexis, has created an amazing world in which we play. It always gets more and more complicated. You know, just when we thought things were kind of like we figured out what was going on and get things under control and get into our story arcs and that kind of thing, all of a sudden there's a new nemesis. In this case, there's a new nemesis that I'm not sure what we can do about him. He's taken up time magic, which is like a thing that's prohibited. And there's even a whole police force trying to enforce it, but this particular nemesis, and I'm not sure why, because we haven't done anything to him. We've actually been trying to help. Has decided to come after us, cast us into a totally different timeline in which one of our characters was actually dead, which isn't really cool. I'm going to take on this big long thing here. It's a big seam. You can see it here. It require a lot of work. Oh yeah, I went quiet again. I forgot to talk. Not how to talk. I forgot to talk. I forgot that I'm supposed to be doing a monologue here to keep people engaged. So yes, our D&D show. Watch it. It's amazing. Our characters are really cool. Our DM is outstanding. Our story arc is amusing. We do a lot of stuff with food. This is going to take a long time, even with the 400 grit. Wow. Again, it's really tempting to use the file on this, but it would take a long, long time. Probably just as long as this is taking to sand out the file scratches. Whenever I've used the file on surfaces like this before, it's turned out to be a bad idea. There would be, somehow or other, there would be a gouge. Even if I was being really careful, there would be a gouge, and then I would take a long, long time to get it out. And I've got like a 250 grit and 150 grit, which would go faster than this, but those would leave pretty deep scratch marks as well. So I'm just going to be patient, and you all have to be patient too, because this is what's happening, is I'm sanding out this really, really significant seam. And it's just going to take as long as it's going to take to get it done. At least I can hold on to it. Sometimes when I'm doing this kind of thing, there isn't even a place to grip it. Do I dare use a coarser paper? Taking a very long time. Let me see what I've got in my sandpaper inventory. This is pretty rough. I mean, it would really cut. 220, 320. Let me try the 320. No, just as, as a warning, I'm going to use the 320 and see if this goes any better. But then I'm going to have to do a lot of sanding with the 400 and then a lot with the 1000. But the misalignment, I'll even call it that, that's creating this seam is really significant. For the most part, this 320 is actually considered to be fine sandpaper, but for this particular application, it's pretty coarse. But it is cutting, I guess I'll call it that. It's removing plastic faster. And I guess, I'm just going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do the real rough shaping like this, and then do a whole lot of polishing down. Otherwise, I'm going to be at this for a very, very long time. That's why I'll just be a very long time, not a very, very long time. These parts didn't line up, but at least there's a lot of plastic here that allows me to do some significant shaping without breaking through. So this is pretty good sandpaper, but the downside is that it fills in. You can see all the white on there. Okay, the white, that's the plastic dust, and it fills the grit, and then the grit doesn't grit anymore. Stops being abrasive. So I end up using a lot of it. But the end result, it's going to look okay. I'm pretty sure it'll look okay. Taking a good deal of abrasion. Make the seam line disappear. Yeah, it's a pretty rough surface. Going to be a lot of polishing on that. There's going to be 3 levels of polishing on that. I'm going to go over it with the 400, then the 1000, and I've got some other emery cloth that I'm going to use to do a final polish. Which is all unfortunate but essential, just given the way this is done. Hoping that I'm patient enough to get this really close, because after I prime it, I don't particularly want to come back and have to redo the whole thing. Sometimes has to happen. Be careful there. Put my little finger onto the wheel. If that breaks off, I've got a major problem. Looks like I might have to do some touching up. Just catching it a little bit with it's probably sanding dust more than anything, but still. So the pod here is one problem, and then there's a big seam along here that's going to be the same sort of thing. Just a lot of sanding and then cleaning up. It's not quite as long, but it's pretty significant misalignment of the parts, giving rise to a highly visible seam. So if you watch our D&D show, you will find out a lot about how it is very food-centric. We spend a lot of time, if we're not like fighting for our lives, which we seem to be doing fairly often lately, we're doing battle with giant fungus monsters or time manipulating pseudo wizards or having Battle of the Bands, which is something we just did not too terribly long ago. We did one of our characters, Nines, our Tabaxi Bard, who has been cursed and turned into a badger. You need to go back and watch that to make sense of it. Had a synthwave contest with an upstart musician. It came out pretty well. Actually, the person who plays the bard is a musician and composed and recorded the music for the battle. So the battle itself was actually it was a pretty cool event. I enjoyed being part of the audience. My character was part of the audience, since my character has really no musical talent and was not part of the battle. I got to be part of the audience appreciation. Yeah, every once in a while I check to see if I'm on camera. Not often enough. If I had a producer and a camera person, and who were competent, unlike me, you'd probably see what was going on a lot better. Not that there's much to be seen. I'm just taking bits of white plastic off of this to make the seam disappear. It's getting pretty close. Look at it from this angle, from the top. This is where the discontinuity. Yeah, I can even still feel it. even though I can't really see it. I can feel it with my fingernail. And then after it's primed, I would probably be able to see it. But after it was painted aluminum, I would definitely be able to see it, which would not be good, because the whole point of this is to not see it, or arrange it so that it's not seen. It's getting a lot closer. Give it another go over with this grit, and then start the polishing process. Well, this is going to end up taking up the entire stream. So I have been told that I should look into getting a little miniature power sander. I actually looked them up for about $35, $40. I'm not sure, not sure how they would work. The one thing that slows this down, when I mentioned that, is that the sandpaper fills with the plastic dust, right? And then it stops being gritty. And the sanding heads on these things are really tiny. I mean, just like the size of my thumbnail or so. And I mean, it vibrates quickly. It probably would work a lot faster than doing this if the sandpaper didn't fill up too quickly. Because if it did, then I'd have to be changing it about every 4 or 5 seconds, and that wouldn't save any time at all, would it? No. I'm taking really special care, though, on these pods, because they're one of the most visible parts of the model. They're right on the outside edge. If you look at it, this is one of the biggest and first things you're going to see. And if they don't look good, then the whole thing will look not good. Good. Hand cramp. That helps from just, from holding something still like that for a long time. So this is somewhat finer sandpaper that I'm using to, get rid of any significant scratches and give it kind of a uniform texture. And then I'll use a much finer sandpaper after this to do even more of that. Then I'll do this bit up here, same sort of process, and then I'll do the leading and trailing edges of the wings, which I hope will go much more quickly. You've seen. Get the very fine grit here. I'm doing the inside of the pot here so I don't forget it. At this point, it looks pretty decent. I'm hoping that after it's painted, it looks good too. I'll find out after it's painted, won't I? This stuff is an emery cloth. Vinyl. Here, the coarse stuff again, because there's a big ridge there. Big group, big chunk of plastic that needs to be made to go away. That little detail is going to disappear. There's a little rectangle here that's kind of molded on right at the leading edge of the wing. I don't think that can be preserved. It's still, I mean, there might be a little vestige of it, but that's about it. This is where I should start talking about 1950s cartoon shows and stuff. Well, I was going to talk about in my grade school, it was a K through 8. Okay, we didn't have a middle school. It's a K through 8 school. Some time ago, it was like that. That was fairly common. There was a good side to that, though, because I understand that middle school is a really tough time because you're with your classmates and you're growing up together, and then you get thrown in when you're just becoming a preteen. What is it, like 6th, 7th grade? About 11 or 12 years old, somewhere in that range. And you get thrown in with a whole bunch of new people, and everybody's doing the pecking order, the social pecking order thing. And that's when, when you can have a really tough time of it socially, I guess. I didn't have that because right on up through 8th grade, before going into high school, we all grew up together. I mean, from 1st grade on. And so when we got to be like 11 or 12 years old, we were together. We'd been friends for like 5 years, 6 years. And so we didn't have that whole middle school kind of thing. You know, the Monkey Island pecking order kind of stuff that can happen. I think there was a lot to be said for that. That might be hard to do nowadays. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it was a little school. There were like 26, somewhere between 25 and 30 kids in my class. I mean, all the way from first grade to 8th grade. And there were very few people who came and went during that period of time. A couple of people moved. I think like 2 or 3 people moved out during that time, and maybe a couple of people showed up around 5th grade-ish. I kind of remember that happening. But yeah, I mean, in that kind of setting, it was possible. In that kind of setting, it was possible for us to all grow up together, which was kind of a unique thing. I don't think you can have that unless you grow up in a really small rural area nowadays. Maybe, or even a private school. Even private schools aren't going to be, keep a class together from K through 8. It's just not going to happen. So I guess I was kind of privileged that way. It was a nice way to grow up. But that isn't what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about how a couple of times a week we had music. And there was like a songbook. Actually, no, it was different than that. It was, this was thinking back at it. As I'm thinking back at it. It was kind of a weird thing. There was like a music radio show that came on at a certain time on a Wednesday or something. It was maybe 15, 20 minutes long. And our school subscribed to that. And we had the primitive public address system with speakers in the classroom. And the teacher would tune into the radio show, and it played the music that we sang along to with our songbooks. Yeah, that was as I'm thinking about it, that was just a really interesting thing. That because we didn't have like an orchestra or something in the school, or didn't have to have like a record player. It would have been a record player back then. A classroom could have had a record player, and you could have played the record and sang along to it. But no, it was a regular played over the radio. And then we we all sang along to whatever was playing on the radio. It was all the the usual stuff for the most part. We got to learn Frère Jacques. We got to sing in French. It could have been a French lesson. We could have, learned that Frère was brother, even though we sang it in English too. Brother John. You had to piece together yourself that Frère Jacques was Brother John. But the translation, thinking back at it, the translation wasn't all that accurate. Well, actually, sort of, are you sleeping, Brother John? Okay, in English, it was in that direction. It's, are you sleeping, Brother John, Brother John. In French, it was, Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, which was the opposite. It was, Brother John, are you sleeping? Did we piece that together? Probably not, although we could have. And then it was morning bells are ringing, morning bells are ringing. And in French, it was sonne le matin. So sonne was something like sounding. So again, the verb was first, sonne le, something sounding, sonne le. But I don't know what matina was. Is matina morning bell? Because in English it was morning bells are ringing, morning bells are ringing. But in French it was sonne le matina. So the things that were sonning, sounding, le, the matinas were sounding. Whatever those were, that's what they were. And then we got, the nuns got really creative. So not only did we, have Sonne Le Matina, but we started to sing in rounds, where one group would start singing the song and then the other one would come in later and another group would come in later. And we'd have like 3 or 4 groups of kids all singing in not unison. We did that with Row, Row, Row Your Boat as well. I think part of that was because that year in school, our teacher was the organist and choir director. Suddenly the invisible seam has become visible again. I'm not quite sure what that's about. Can't feel it. I could see it a little bit when I used the polishing cloth. This is another one of those places on the plane that's highly visible. It's right at the start of the wing. It's going to show. So if there's a flaw there, it's going to be, you're going to see it. It's kind of there. I can see it, but it doesn't. I don't feel it. How much more I should go at it or not. Pretty much disappeared. So I think I'm just going to keep. I'm going to go back over it again. If I spend some time on it now and just get it right. Otherwise, after it's primed, I'm going to have to do this again. Yeah, so we sort of learned French with Frere Jacques. Those of us who, bothered trying to piece it together as opposed to just, surviving singing. I have no singing talent. My range is like a half of an octave. And it's kind of an unpredictable place in the half of the octave too. So it's like if I start to sing something, can never really be sure quite what notes are going to be produced. But what I do know is that if a note gets produced, there isn't going to be very many notes above or below it. Whatever that note is pretty much in isolation, whether it's what it's supposed to be or not. It's never particularly good. But it was, it was a break from the other classes, so it was an okay thing to do, to have the singing class and get to see row your boat in rounds with four different groups singing, sophisticated musical stuff going on there. There's some other, oh yeah, interesting thing. This is an interesting thing that happened. Here's an anecdote. I'm going to tell you an anecdote related to singing in class. So we're singing in class, right? And not everybody was really, fully attentive. I would like to have not been attentive, but I was mostly a good student, so I was attentive even though I didn't want to be. So the seam is invisible up here. You can still see it here, though. How much more I want to. So, we're all singing along, being good students, but Michael wasn't paying attention. Michael was doing, but the teacher just called him out and, for not paying attention. I don't think he was like talking with someone else because he was isolated in the attention that he got. So, there always has to be a punishment of some sort if you're caught out doing things. At least back then it was. Okay, if you're not going to pay attention, it was a woman teacher, but I'll use my voice. If you're not going to pay attention during singing, then you're just going to sing on your own. So poor Michael had to stand up in front of the class because, you couldn't just do this in private, like go to the principal's office and sing. No, you had to stand up in front of the class and sing. Well, it turned out that Michael had like the most amazing angelic voice. I mean, seriously, just beautiful. You were in like 6th grade or something, so like the Canterbury Boys Choir kind of thing. And everybody just went, ooh. And yeah, he went from not paying attention during singing to doing the solo during the you always had these kids always put on like little shows and stuff for the parents. Recital, that's what it was. So yeah, Michael got to be the soloist in the recital because he wasn't paying attention during singing. It's so weird. Can't tell if that's just a discoloration or if there's really a gap there. Sorry, this is taking so long. It's just baffling because the seam is invisible. And then, yeah, I think it just needs to be sanded down more. Well, that's my anecdote from singing class is Michael went from being a disobedient, naughty boy to being the star of the show. Which goes to show you the moral of that story for me was pay attention during music class. Otherwise, you're going to be put up in front of the class and have to sing. And in my case, I can say with 100% certainty that I would not have been selected to do a solo. Nope, definitely not. It's not picking up anything. Let that be so that I can move along with the rest of this. I hope that was somewhat interesting. There's actually a gap. But there's a gap in the leading edge. Right there, there is. Let's fill that in. A tiny little gap. It's going to be hard to fill in. Well, thank you for listening to my story about music class in 6th grade. What else? Well, yeah, there were other things about it. It was actually kind of. I remember what else we sang. For Jacques, row, row, row your boat. These things that you do in rounds because that was a thing to do. It was, sophisticated and complicated. Oh, this was, yeah. So when we finally graduated after 8th grade, we had to, do a graduation ceremony, and there was had to have a song. Our song "Climb Every Mountain." Is that from The Sound of Music? I don't even know. I've never seen Sound of Music, believe it or not. Better believe it. It is true. I've never seen Sound of Music. And so I am not sure, but I think "Climb Every Mountain," "Ford Every Sea," "Follow Every Rainbow Till You Find Your Dream," something like that. It was supposed to be very uplifting, leaving 8th grade, going out into the wide, wide world of high school, making a big deal about leaving 8th grade. That was kind of weird, actually. But, we survived and we're leaving 8th grade, so there's that. But we didn't just sing, "Climb Every Mountain," "Ford Every Sea," that kind of thing. No, we had to do it. And this is actually true. We had to do it in 4-part harmony. Here we are. We're like 12 and 13 years old, right? And we're singing this thing in 4-part harmony. I think we spent probably the last 3 weeks of 8th grade. It felt like this anyway. Like the last 3 weeks of 8th grade, we didn't do anything except practice our graduation song, just over and over and over. We each had to sing our own parts separately. We all got divided up. I think there were 4 parts. Yeah, there was, soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. I mean, we were coming up with baritones in 8th grade was a little bit difficult, but just a little contrast in tenor tone, I guess, was enough. So yeah, that I remember that. I'll just tell that anecdote over and over and over, singing our parts separately and then together, and singing your part without listening to anybody else's part, because then you'd get confused and try to sing like them or vice versa. Wow, I don't know why she thought that was a good idea, but that's what we did, and we pulled it off. I think it sounded okay. The parents all thought it did, but then, they didn't have a choice because they were the parents of an 8th grade graduating class, and their kids made it to high school. That was a good thing. Okay, I'm gonna get some of this plastic dust everywhere. I'm gonna use the white filler putty and just put some along the seam of the leading edge, because it's there is a gap there. Here too, just I don't know what's going on there, but put some of this on. It's gonna hurt. Put down into it, and then on Friday I'll do some more sanding on that. This thing isn't going to get painted and primed until it's fully assembled, because the wings and everything else get painted the same color. Well, that took a long time, and I've got another whole wing to go. Excess on. This stuff tends to shrink a little bit as it cures. Okay, well, that's about as good as I can get it, at least at this point. I'm going to have to give it another go after this. Okay, I've got another one. Yay. Start with the inside again. Well, I did warn everybody that this was going to be a sanding show, and there's a lot of sanding going on here. Be another one of these. 320 grit, and then 400 grit, and then 1000 grit, and then polish. And I'll go a little bit faster because I learned to use the coarser sandpaper first. Yay. Well, yeah. So then I went on to high school, and there wasn't any singing in high school. I mean, other than, we went to a Catholic high school, so yeah, I can't say there wasn't any, but they were, hymns during the church services, and, with a couple hundred other kids. As long as you just, kind of made sounds that were close to the sounds that were supposed to be with the music, it was okay. And that's about the best I could do, was get sounds that, were close enough so the people around me didn't say, please shut up. It would have been in church, so they would have said, please. They probably wouldn't have said, shut up. They probably would have been even more polite because it was in church. It would have been, please sing more silently. something like that. It's probably more what it would have been like. Because, you know, no voice talent, 0 Zilcho. Almost to the point that it was unpleasant to hear. To just be honest about that, it probably was pretty much to the point where it's unpleasant to hear. Now, I got this big long chunk here. Now I should probably do these. I'm going to do these bits here first. Sides of the wheels. Don't want to forget those. It would really be nice is when, you know, they make these plastic models, they would actually put the seams where there was a seam in the plane. You know, then it wouldn't be so much work making the seams that are not where they are on the plane disappear. So as a heads up, on Friday I'll be doing lots more sanding. I'll be inspecting these parts probably with a head magnifier, you know, just to see as much as I can see about whether the seams are seamless, okay, whether I had success at all doing that. And then I've got the other part that I cemented together earlier that that needs to be done, the fuselage part. Yeah. So I'll be inspecting this to see if, you know, to see how well I actually succeeded in getting the seams gone. But then I've got the fuselage part, which has significant challenges of its own. And then I have to inspect that. And then they'll get primed. And I'm pretty sure that after they've been primed, I will find that I did not get rid of all the flaws. And then I've got a good deal more to go. So there won't be any gluing really on Friday. There'll just be a lot of just more sanding. I'll probably change the wording on what are we doing today. It says what we're painting. It really should just say what are we doing today, because usually it's, I mean, lately there hasn't been much painting. It would have been an easy fix. Things were updated over the weekend. Well, last week while I was gone on my travels, there was an update that finally changed the streaming time. You know, it said from 10 until 2, which used to be the truth about a year ago, but hasn't been for a good long time. That's a weird phrase, good long time, as opposed to what, a bad long time or a mediocre long time, or just for some time. It has not been true. I've only been going until 1, which is what I'm going to, I got another hour? Really? Huh. It felt like 2 hours. Probably felt like 2 hours to you too. Listening to me talk about singing in 6th grade and 7th grade. And watching some sense of futility, trying to sand out the significant problems with the glue joints here. Can't really see the seam, but there's a bulge. Prominent bulge in the side pod. I don't know if these might have been fuel tanks. I'm guessing they were fuel tanks. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense if there are these big bulges on the ends of the wings. I have to get some new coarse grit here. It would have made sense to have a power sander on this. I should have getting my big belt sander out and just zap this. Blah. Or I probably could have filed it, but that would have created its own problems of having to get all the gouge marks out. Starting to get curious about what I'm going to find. Well, up front here, it's really bad again. Hopefully the wings will be okay. Getting better. The misshapenness of it is starting to disappear. What can I talk about for the last hour? Go back to Yogi Bear, Tom Terrific, Gilligan's Island, F Troop. F Troop. Car parts. Weird airplanes. There were a lot of weird airplanes back in the 50s and 60s. They started doing all sorts of odd things. There was a saucer thing, gigantic fans inside of like a hovercraft, an early hovercraft, which actually went into, they actually went into production. There were hovercraft ferries and things for a while, but those kind of disappeared because they're just really, they're kind of a cool thing, but not very practical in reality. Yeah, but it was like, oh, we made a flying saucer, which was a big deal, like in 1949 after the big Roswell thing, flying saucers crashed, all of that. But it wasn't really a flying saucer. It was just this round thing with fans in the bottom, some guy sitting in the middle. It went up off the ground maybe 1.5 feet. And they had big photo ops. You can come and watch it. It got up off the ground about 1.5 feet, and it rotated 360 degrees and then rotated back in the other direction. And then I think it actually moved forward maybe 1 foot or 2 forward and back. And that was it. That's all it did. That was the extent of its capabilities. But, I think it was even the Army who did it. I don't know if it was the Air Force. But it was a flying saucer in the sense that it got up off the ground and it was round. But that was just one of the weird kinds of planes. It wasn't even a plane. Weird kind of aviation-like things that were created back then. Northrop built a flying wing. They built 2 versions of it. One was propeller powered, the other was jet powered, which foreshadowed the B-2 bomber, the stealth bomber. It was done back then, but it never got beyond the prototype. Yeah, I managed to just scar that up just like that. Nicely done. And for some reason, the dogs are barking. You can't hear it, but usually what that means is that somebody's walking their dog past the window out in front. They get all excited about other dogs coming by. And it's not like a bad bark. It's not like a warning away bark. It's more of a, hey, let's get together and run around and play kind of bark. Okay, well, that's not too bad. Do this bit in front now. This is very bad. So this unfortunately is going to take a while again. I knew that when I first cemented it together. It was just really hard to get the parts to match. It was actually hard to get them to stick together at all because it actually bends there. The one part of it had to bend over the other in order to make contact. It takes some aggressive sanding. This is where it's tempting to get the file out. It really is tempting to get the file out. No, it's not any faster. I have to be too careful with it to be able to go faster. So I'll just use the coarse sandpaper, and at least I'm only sanding down polystyrene, I think it is. You're not trying to do hardened steel or tungsten or something like that. You definitely have to get power tools then. Okay, so what else can I say about grade school other than we grew up together? So I went to this Catholic school, a small Catholic school. Like I said, there were like 25 or 30 kids in the class. Kind of varied between those two numbers. And there weren't enough classrooms for all eighth in the building. The building was in the same building as the church, at least initially. So 2 grades, we called them the barracks. Okay. They were essentially tar paper shacks that were out in the parking lot. I mean, they really were. They were just wooden frames and tar paper siding. They were heated. It wasn't a wood burning stove, but it was pretty much just a stove in the classrooms. And I think, the 5th and 6th grade got stuck out there. It was because of the, the little kids. You didn't want to put the little kids out there, and, 1st through 4th, that kind of thing. That wouldn't have been good for them. And then, the 7th and 8th graders were privileged because they were like, whoa, we're the coolest kids in the world because we're like a year older or something. Got to be taught in the barracks. Wooden floors. They were actually quite cold in the winter, which was most of it, because the school year is in the fall and in the spring, so it's mostly winter. The heating was not adequate. I don't remember. It would have made sense, but I can't say that this actually happened. That the teachers' pets got to sit near the stove. I can't say that did happen, but it was the kind of thing that could have happened in that kind of a setting. That As you just, bundle up. You wore a heavy shirt and a sweater, and sometimes you just kept your coat on if it was particularly cold. Eventually, yeah. Well, I only spent 1 year in the barracks because they built a new church, a dedicated building, great. I mean, it was very extravagant. It was like 50% capacity more than the parish size, but it was the 1960s. Also, for his exuberance going on. And the consequence of that is that what had been the church, which was the second floor of the building we were in, what had been the church was unconsecrated. I'm not sure whatever they do. Remember now, there was a kind of a whole ceremony involving the bishop that needed to be done in order to unchurch the church so that it could be gutted and turned into classrooms. So besides having this gigantic new church, beautiful windows, though, beautiful stained glass windows, I have to say, they were pretty amazing. But every class got its own room, and the barracks were torn down, and the parking lot, which was also our playground, became a lot bigger, and that was a nice thing. That was a really nice thing to have. So that's another reminiscence of that part of my personal life, to give you some, insight into what things were like in this small school back in the 1960s. Just a lot of singing, though. There was a lot of that. It was sort of coming along. I'm getting a hand cramp from holding this, though. Nose part up here, the air intake. Yeah, there's some major discontinuity going on there that I hadn't taken out, so I have to focus on that for a bit. Well, even Amon disappeared. This is really boring today, isn't it? Television genres, yeah. So those all kind of, they came in. There was a whole kind of a sure what's happening here. The development of television genres at the time. So that initially, like in the 50s, everything was a Western. There were so many Westerns. And like anything else, the Westerns, they were mostly serious, and there was always a shootout. There was a lot of killing going on back then on television. But then there was always the comedy version as well. So that's where F Troop was. So, you had your Daniel Boone and your Wyatt Earp and your Gunsmoke and your Wagon Train and like Bonanza. Jeez, it was like endless. Have Gun Will Travel, Paladin. Business card was a knight, chess piece knight. Wow, this isn't even close yet. I can still feel the seam. Wow. I have to apologize. This is really requiring a lot of sanding. I mean, it's just way more than I thought it would. There were 3 networks, right? So it's 3 networks, and everything just went in fads. I'll just have to say that's the impression it gave. So there were all these westerns. There were a couple of doctor shows. There turned out to be only 2 doctor shows that I remember, other than the soap operas. And Casey and Dr. Kildare, and you had to have a favorite. Okay. You couldn't just say, well, I don't like any of them. That wasn't permitted. Or you couldn't say, well, they're both okay. That wasn't permitted. But there were only 2 of them that I recall, as opposed to the billions of westerns. I should try to remember those. Here, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to remember all of the westerns. There was Davy Crockett. They all had really cool theme songs. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. Born on a Mountaintop in Tennessee. The greatest state in the land of the free. I mean, whoa. Talk about your politicization. Build a bar when he was only 3. For some reason, you had to say bar. You couldn't just say bear. Okay, that's not good there. There's a separation. I'm going to have to re-cement that. I'm just going to have to do that. Yeah. So there's Davy Crockett. There was Wyatt Earp. That was another one of those, distortions of actual history. Wyatt and his brothers were these itinerant lawmen. I don't know how you could do that, but that was a thing you could apparently do back then, is you could just say, hi, I'm a lawman. What does that mean? I don't know. I just, I carry my own badge. I'm really not sure how that worked, but he would actually go from place to place and be a law guy, a marshal or whatever, wherever he was. I don't remember the real history or not, but in the television show, he was brave, courageous, and bold. Long live his name, and long live his glory, and long may his story be told. Which was not the reality of Wyatt Earp anyway. Mostly famous for the shootout at the OK Corral, where either it was a fair fight or it was an ambush, depending on what version of history you want to listen to. that got turned into all sorts of movies and things, even big famous gunfight at the OK Corral, which turned out not to be in the corral at all, but in a vacant lot near the corral. But, you know, it's not that cool to say, oh, the gunfight in the vacant lot near the corral. About the gunfight at the OK Corral. In Tombstone, of course, that was a cool name. No, it's a tourist spot. No, yeah, I was going to name Westerns, Davy Crockett, Wyatt Earp. Jim Bowie, a famous Bowie knife. So it's either Bowie or Bowie, depending on, you know, how you say it, I guess. Here's another one, Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, F Troop, you know, the comedy version of the genre. Every genre had a comedy version, you know, like World War II stuff had Hogan's Heroes. All the spy stuff that came later, that was a big deal. You know, you had the Avengers and Secret Agent and Mission Impossible. There were a whole lot of those, and then you had Get Smart because you had to have a funny version. There weren't very many cop shows then. There was Car 54, Where Are You? Which was the funny version of a cop show, but it wasn't. There weren't a lot of other really serious ones that I recall. There were a lot of private detective ones for a while. That was another big genre. And then after Star Trek, almost knocked that off. You know, there were space things. There was Lost in Space and Battlestar Galactica, and you know, stuff like that happened. So an intentionally little raised area right here, but right next to it on this wing is an excess glob of plastic, which isn't supposed to be there. It's in a place that's really hard to get. Nice cramp there. That was a big hand cramp. I'm using the file, hopefully really gently. Make that disappear. But yeah, it was kind of like if one station came out with something that was kind of different and everybody else jumped on it because, you know, that's what you had to do. What's going on here? There's it's not where the seam is. There's not a gap in the front of this like there was on the other one. Well, this isn't being perfect, but it's getting better. Yeah, the prep work on this, I knew it was going to be arduous, that there was just going to be a lot of prep work on these parts. I could tell by the way they didn't fit together when I test fit them. And it has more than lived up to its expectation here. I'm starting to get impatient. So I need to be a little bit cautious here and not, I'm going to recheck all of these parts on Friday, like I said, with the head magnifier, because it's all going to get painted aluminum, and that will show, excuse me, flaws will become very obvious. Okay. And a few not very obvious flaws are one thing, but some like, oh, that's just a huge mistake kind of flaw, that is a different story altogether. And that's not a good story. I mean, it's another one of those weird phrases. That's a different story. Of course, it's a different story. What is that supposed to mean? I'm going to get these to be close to where they should be, but the, in addition to doing preliminary sanding on the fuselage and the vertical and horizontal stabilizers. Now, the vertical stabilizers, the two giant ones that are there not to keep the plane, I guess I'll call it a plane, stable, but because while it's flying, but to keep it stable on the ground, give it a nice 4-point support. Okay. Yeah, I needed to re-cement this. Those pins. Now my work surface managed to get really cluttered. Look at the fine job I did of making a mess. Okay, I'm going to cement this from the inside. Usually what happens is that it kind of oozes through, they called it capillary action, to fill the gap. Oh yeah, that's right. I couldn't use a clothespin on this. That's why it got messed up. Because it collapses on itself. I need to tiny bit of paper towel and get rid of that excess. Okay. You may recall from another time that, and you'll see it on the fuselage when I get back to it on Friday, that I'm just gonna end up holding this for like 2 minutes and then taping it. And if it doesn't work, I'll end up having to put filler in and sand it down. That's why these models take forever. Oh, hi, Enforcer. A college class. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for dropping in, even if just for a little bit. Guys, you're starting over with something new. But thanks for dropping in. You'll have to tell me about your class sometime. Maybe you can come back Friday. So if you might recall from Monday, cementing this together was a difficult thing because the plastic had to bend in order to make contact, and I couldn't put a clothespin clamp on it because it clamped. I couldn't get it to clamp solely on the contact points. It clamped back here and actually pulled it apart. So this is going to be that there's even cement in there. Cement on the inside, but okay, I'm going to do this. This isn't the best thing to do. It's to be done. So that's going to create a patch of softened plastic, but I want it to weld together as much as possible so that I don't have to put too much filler in it. Now I'm going to just hold this now. This is really not easy to do, actually. It's kind of hand cramping. But this part right here where my thumbs are together, that's going to, on Friday, I'm going to have to sand that down and probably put filler in, and then probably wait for that filler to set up, and then sand it down some more. Because it's a highly visible part of the plane. So speaking of highly visible parts of the plane, you might recall that on Monday, looking through the tail of the plane into the tailpipe, I put some little pieces of cardboard in to block the view so I could paint them flat black so you didn't just look into nothing. Okay, so you didn't just look into nothing on the inside of the model. The same thing is true here of the air intakes up in the front. As I'm holding these together, I'm noticing that when you look in the front, it is looking into the inside of the model. And so I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put like a little barrier in there, cut it out of cardboard and rubber cement it in, and paint that. Probably like steel. I'm going to use a metallic paint, not the flat black that I used for the jet exhaust, because this is a turboprop with a turbine engine, a jet engine, essentially running a propeller. The front of this, the air intake, probably would have gone into like a bare aluminum kind of thing. So I'm just going to paint it either dark aluminum or steel, both metallic colors. So that when you look into the opening, you don't just see the unfinished inside of the model. Well, I don't know how much longer I feel like holding this, but probably a while yet. And then my thumbs are going to be, the circulation is cutting out. Okay, it just isn't holding very well. I'm going to do what I did before. I'm just going to tape it, and it will hold as well as it does. And unfortunately, I like I said, there's no way I can clamp it. Not even a Bob Clampett. Beanie and Cecil, Bob Clampett cartoon. Yeah, you don't know what I'm talking about, but you should watch it. Catch Beanie and Cecil. Okay. It was one of the very few cartoons. I mean, Jay Ward always did good cartoons like Rocky and Bullwinkle, but didn't self-promote. Jay Ward didn't self-promote in the theme song. But Beanie and Cecil's theme song went out of its way to talk about a Bob Clampett cartoon. Shameless self-promotion during a theme song of our cartoon show. I don't know if I really approve of that. But Beanie was this kid who wore a beanie with a propeller on it. Okay, one of those propeller beanies. And Cecil was the seasick sea serpent. That was alliteration. Okay, yeah, the inside of the air intake, you can see just how poorly that's made, but it's highly visible. It's right on the front, so that's going to require actually a fair. Oh, this isn't working at all. I need to take that tape off. I'm looking at the inside of the air intake, okay, and you say, well, why bother with that? But it's right at the front of the plane. It's highly visible, and it's just not symmetric at all. It's just there. It's not good. Take this off and see what I can do about it. See, I'm trying to get. Oh, this is okay. Here you can see what's going on. Is that this is really it's thick here and thin there. So I'm going to have to file this or sand it down. It's even if I move them a little bit like that, there's still a real difference in the thickness of the plastic. So that's going to have to be like filed down so that they're a little more uniform. And to move these together. If I worry about that too much, then the outside of it gets even more messed up than it is. Can you tell I'm not happy about this? No. And it's a tiny little thing, right? And you go, why make a big deal about it? Well, I'm making a big deal about it because I want this to look okay within, at my skill level, which is I'm not a skill level 3. Definitely not. Okay. Try to get these lined up as well as I can, and then get the tape on it to hold it sort of where I want it. But there's nothing that can be done about the fact that they're different thicknesses. Yeah. That's where it has to be. And then I need to do some significant work on the seam on Friday and also on the front. If I look at the other one, I'm sure I'm going to see the same thing. It's not quite as bad, but yeah, there's the gap there. We've got a little bit of time. I'm just going to play with it here. You got a round file. I can talk. I'll talk a little bit about how I'm going, what I'm going to be doing to this and why. So this fits against the fuselage like this, okay? And if you look in it, what you see is the inside of the wing, okay? And it's just not great. It doesn't look great. So what I'm going to do is something similar to what I did to the tail of the plane. And like that. Okay, you can see a good long way down. I'm going to play with it now. I got a few minutes. What I want to do is put a baffle in here, just a piece of like cardboard, so that when you look in, you don't see the whole inside of nothingness, but it sort of stops. I mean, I could paint this whole thing. Sense of what that looks like. I'm looking at an alternative. Really not a bad option. Okay, this goes up against the fuselage. Is I could paint no, because then the fuselage should be unpainted. I was thinking of painting the entire interior, the dark metallic color, the entire interior, but the fuselage comes up against it here, and I'm not planning to paint the inside of the fuselage. So what I can do is I can put a baffle in, okay, like I did with the tail. When this is assembled against the fuselage, then I can paint the inside of it up to the baffle, but getting paint all the way down there is going to be next to impossible. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to see if I can do that. I had a little bit of success. Wasting some time here. I'm just going to leave this mess. I'm just going to leave this mess here after today's stream, because why not? Maybe I'll clean it up tomorrow. Maybe I won't. I'm starting to feel grumpy. I need blood sugar. Take this piece of cardboard. This is more or less the shape. Okay, the front of it, the place where I'm going to put the baffle is larger. It's further back, but this gives me a sense of the shape. Rather poorly done. Very poorly done, as a matter of fact. Okay, I'm just going to leave these out. They are such a mess that there's no need to protect them from the dust, is there? This is one of those classic low risk, low reward kinds of things. I know it's red at the moment. That doesn't much matter, as it's going to get painted a darker color. And I want it to go like kind of right there. That didn't work at all. The thing I just did. It's kind of better on the bottom. It needs to go in further into the plane. If this doesn't work, I'll mess around with it more on Friday. Yeah, no, I just made it way too small. I could move it up. I move it up further. I can put it there. And then it's just about right. It's not a bad place for it. Here, let me have totally cluttered my workspace. Totally and completely. Utterly. I have utterly, that's the right word. I have utterly cluttered my workspace. There. That's what I wanted. Okay, you can see it's red, but it's not going to stay red. It's going to get painted some dark metallic color. But when you look in the front now, assuming, imagine that this is all painted a dark metallic color. Okay. When you look in the front, and that includes this where it's attached to the fuselage, so I'll paint it after it's assembled. There. Now I just need to do that to the other side, which I'm not going to do now. Well, maybe why not? Since I've got this, if I want one just like it, Okay, yep. Ability to actually hold on to anything there. That's clever. Cut it out roughly like that because I'm one-handed. Let's see if this fits or not. Should we give it a try? Why not? What can happen that other than it not working? Can happen is I can just drop it because, and stuff. Well, yeah. I mean, other than me not being able to hold on to it, it looks like it actually would. It's actually going to fit pretty well. Oh my. There. The other one's stuck. I mean, it just sort of stuck in the plane where I wanted it. This one isn't good. No. It isn't. The shape isn't good. Well, it is if I. Oh, okay. If I get it in straight. Okay. So if it goes in like that, I was kind of twisting it. It's close. It's not as good as the other one. It just really isn't. And well, part of it is it needs to be up. Yeah, more like there. But it's yeah, it's not as good as the other one. So I'll have to play with that. I'll have to try again on Friday. All right. Well, enough of this. I'm just making a mess and failing at the moment, flailing and failing. So what I'm going to do is sign off here. I know my monologue wasn't terribly good today at all, but that happens. But you got to see me sand. I did a lot of sanding. I found flaws that needed re-cementing here and filling in here. I succeeded in creating a baffle that I then just knocked out after I had succeeded in doing it well. I'm glad I looked in that and remembered that before it was too late. And so on Friday, what I'll be doing on Friday is I'll be taking all of those clamps and rubber bands off of that and doing more sanding like I did on this. And there's going to be a fair amount of it because there's a lot of surface area there. And then I'll be coming back to these and doing more sanding on these as well, where I re-cemented it and where I did some filler on the leading edge of the wing, and hopefully getting them to the point where they'll look okay with metallic paint on them. And then little stuff too, like the little baffle that I made here, for the front of the air intake, so that it doesn't look, so it looks like it's a little more finished at least. And now we'll just see how it goes. I mean, if I can get the sanding done and it looks good, then I can cement the wings, onto the fuselage. If not, I will continue sanding probably on Monday. It might just be that kind of thing. But eventually these pieces will be good enough to cement together, to do some preliminary detail painting on the insides of the air intake, the exhaust of the jet, and the inside of the canopy here. Oddly enough, on the picture, they painted the inside of the canopy the same aluminum color as the rest of the plane. And that just doesn't make any sense at all. In a real plane, it wouldn't have been just the bare metal like that. It would have been like an olive drab or a dark gray or something. Okay. So I have to think about that. And then, looking down into the canopy, it's also kind of weird. There's a seat that goes in there. I'm not sure how well it covers it. I might need to paint the inside of the fuselage, maybe flat black or something, so it doesn't glare, so it doesn't show quite as badly as it would. So it doesn't look like a plastic model quite as much as it is a plastic model. So that's what I'm going to do on Friday. I'll be sanding down the stuff that's all clamped up here, and I'll be doing hopefully finishing sanding on these guys here, and getting close to being able to assemble the whole thing, which for this model is really close to being done. So thanks for joining in. I'm On an Enforcer. Thanks for joining in on chat. I will see you on Friday at more or less 10 as I make arduous and boring, tedious progress on the preparation of this model for final assembly and painting. Thanks again. See you then.